Hi.
Oh,
Okay.
Hi, Baruch.
Hi, how are you?
Hashem, hello,
good
bye.
evening.
Good evening. Okay. We are we have a little catching up to do, and then we should be pretty much on schedule. We are today's daf is daf samach tes. We are holding daf samach gimel omid beis, and we are discussing the inyan of dowry. And we're discussing loyalenu if a girl doesn't have her father passed away. The halacha is that the children have to take from the estate and give her 10% of the estate, because we assume that if the father was alive, he would be so excited to have his daughter get engaged, he would give over 10% of his estate as a dowry for his new son-in-law. I should have told that to my father-in-law, but that's the normal thing. So the Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught now new chiddush. This is only about a girl who's, let's say, bas mitzvah or younger. Habanos, the daughters, bein bagru achalei nisu. Let's say they became adult. Let's say they became 13, 14 years old. They didn't get married yet. Ubein nisu achalei bagru. Or let's say they got married. Let's say they were 12 years old and they got married. So, and they're not adult yet. So first thing, remember, a daughter always eats the food from the estate for her sustenance. But once she turns into an adult, like girls who are an adult should get their own job. So ibdu mazaynaseim, they lost their food, and especially if she got engaged and married to somebody, that's the husband's issue to supply her with food. V'loi ibdu parnasasam. But if they became, let's say, a 15-year-old girl, and they didn't get married yet, they still have a right to the estate for the dowry. This language, parnasasan, is another word for dowry. So they, just because they turned 13, they couldn't find their shidduch, doesn't mean that they lose the right to the dowry. Divrei Rebbe. These are the words of Rebbe. Hi, Lewis. We're just on Samach Chesam base by the Tanur Rabbanan. We just did a Shitas Rebbe. We're up to Rab Shimon ben Elazar. Rab Shimon ben Elazar says that a girl, again, she lost her father, and normally, if she would get married, the brothers would have to give her 10% of the estate for her dowry. But if she became an adult before she got married, so af ibdu parnasasan, she loses her dowry because she's working. So she's a working girl, so she can afford her own dowry. Kate said Isis. So what should they do? A girl who doesn't want to lose that 10% of her father's assets, and she's, let's say, about to turn into an adult. So Rab Shimon ben Elazar advises the girl, get a husband quick. Just hire a guy to marry you and take out and make a claim for the dowry. Again, make sure you don't turn into an adult, because once you turn into an adult, according to Rab Shimon ben Elazar, you don't have rights to a dowry from the estate. Rav Nachman said, Huna told me, Hilchasa Rebbe. The halacha is like Rebbe. A girl who turns into an adult, she still has rights to the estate, that 10%. The Gemara asks a question. Eisvei Rav Rav Nachman. So Rav asked the question to Rav Nachman. The Brisa says, the Brisa says that an orphan girl, how did she get married? Her brother and mother found a shidduch for her, and she agreed with that. The Kasva law, and they wrote in her for her, B'mea chamishim zuz. This we saw in the Mishnah, that they said, you could take 50 zuz for your dowry. Of course, that was much less than 10%. When she gets older, she can make a lawsuit and said, hey, you were supposed to give me 10%. How did you convince me to take 50 zuz? So we darshim, so that ends the brisa. So Tama the Ketana, only because she's still young when she got married. So she didn't lose her 10% right. Hagedoila, but if she became, let's say she was an adult girl that got married, Vitra, she doesn't have. She lost the rights and obligation, the rights for her 10%. She just gave it up because she turned into an adult. So we see that the Stam Mishnah paskins like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That means if a girl turns into an adult, she lost her rights for the 10%, not like Rebbe. Answers the Gemara like Kasha. It's like Rebbe. Ha de mechai, ha de lo mechai. Very important. It's a very important point. If she says, "Hey, I know I'm being ripped off," then, or she says before she turns into an adult, she says, "I'm still going to lay claim for it." Then she could still claim for that 10%. But ha de lo mechai. Our Mishnah is talking about she agreed to it. Medata. If she agreed to it, even if she was an adult and she agreed to that chamishim zuz, then she sort of like was meichel on the rest. So therefore, if she was a gedolah, she could not make claim against that they owe her 10% because she agreed to it. And you can make, that's a logical difference between if a girl makes a claim or doesn't make, or is not upset about them. She was meichel. The imkain kasha the Rebbe at the Rebbe. We'll have a difficulty in the two opinions of Rebbe. Rebbe again said that a girl who got married, who got turned into an adult, let's say she turned into an adult, she loses her 10%. If she was a girl, a nara, she's 12 years old, and she got married, again, she loses her 10% if she didn't claim it. She doesn't lose her 10%. But here, the Tanya Rebbe Omer, Bas Hani Zainis Mina Achem, a daughter who's still getting food from the brothers. So that means she's 12 years old. They tell it if she would get married, they tell us Isa Nechasim. She would get her 10%. But when she's 13, she's not getting food anymore. So Nizainis N, only if she's below 12, then she gets the 10%. She ain't in Nizainis, but let's say she's an adult, she lost her 10%. But Rebbe said that the 10% is guaranteed no matter what age she gets married, even if she's 18 when she gets married. So how do you reconcile Rebbe? If she makes a claim that before she turns in adulthood and says, "I am not forgiving you, I want my 10% when I get married," so then you have to give it to her. In this case, Rebbe, if the girl just lets things slide and doesn't make a claim, so as soon as she gave up eating and she says, "I don't need your food," so it's automatic that she may have given up the 10% also, and therefore she will not get the 10%. So you have to, in addition, when the girl gets older, she has to be careful to make sure to write it on a paper that I know that you're not obligated to feed me anymore. I'm supposed to get my own job, but I'm still not giving up my rights for that 10%. That 10% is like a condition of the ksuba that the father put in there, that the girl gets a dowry of 10% from his estate. Amalei Ravina Rava. Ravina said to Rava, Amalei Rav Ada bar Hava Mishimcha. Rav Ada bar Hava said in your name, Mr. Rava, Rabbi Rava, Bagra Eina Tzicha Limchais. If she comes older, she doesn't lose it. Not like we said before. She doesn't have to protest. She's still going to get it, even if she didn't, put it in writing that she still wants it. Nises, let's say she's 12 years old and she just happened to get married and she forgot to ask for her 10%. She also doesn't have to protest. In other words, she still has a right to claim for the 10%. When is the case that she needs to make a protest in writing that she's not giving up? Let's say Bagra. Let's say she turned, over Bas Mitzvah. She's 14 years old. And plus, the niece says she got married and she made no mention about the 10%. So now 2 years into her marriage, she wakes up, I want the 10%. Then she doesn't get it. She should have protested before. But if she didn't, she lost her 10%. So now, Amar Rava Hachi, did Rava say such a thing? Well, Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman, Rava asked the question to Rav Nachman about Yusaima. V'shani and he answered, Hadamache, Hadalaimache. One was a case of protesting, and one was a case of no protesting. But you see that Rava holds that you don't even need to protest. Nobody needs to protest. You don't automatically lose it. So how do you answer? How come Rava didn't make that distinction over here? Rava made a distinction that it seems to be that if she doesn't protest, she automatically loses it. And here Rava says that you don't automatically lose it. And
she didn't know.
She didn't know. That's right. So like kasha is not difficult. The komisness aminayu. If she's still getting mezainis from, let's say they're feeding her. So the reason why she didn't protest and demand the 10% dowry is because they're feeding her. So she was embarrassed to also ask for the 10%. So therefore, if she did not ask for it, it doesn't mean she was moichelet. It's just she was too embarrassed to ask. And therefore, that's what Rabbi said. If she turned an adult, she doesn't have to make a macha because she was getting food up until this now. And the fact that she didn't protest is because she was getting food from them. She was embarrassed to protest. But if she was not getting food from them, so then why didn't she demand the 10%? So, and because she doesn't demand the 10%, if she turned into an adult and she wasn't eating, she wasn't taking any money from the estate, and she didn't demand the 10%, and she turned into an adult, she lost her 10%. So it's a fine line that regarding that 10%. It's there for her to take it, but if there's any indication that she was, she forgave it, the brothers don't have to give it to her.
Not moichelet.
He's moichelet, yeah. Now, the Gemara says like this: what type of, you see, when a father dies, the Tnai Ksiba is that he has to make sure that the orphans, the Yisayimim, have food. That's for sure. That's a part of that's a Tnai Ksiba. But what about the dowry? Is that like a Tnai Ksiba? What does that mean? That means like this: Omer Rav Huna Omer Rebbe, Parnasa, the 10%, it's not like a regular Tnai Ksuba, like the mezainos that he has to supply. We'll see what that means in a moment. My Einek Tnai Ksuba. What did Rav Huna mean that it's not like Tnai Ksuba? Does he mean to say, Dili Parnasa Tarfo Mishabde? Oh, this is a very, very big thing. Let's say the father died, he left over this big estate. The girl is entitled to 10% when she gets married. Let's say before she gets married, they sold off some properties. So we're saying that it's not like a Tnai Ksuba. In fact, there's a lien on those properties. And therefore, when it's time for her to get married, she could claw back those properties and say it was sold not legally. It's mine because it belongs to me. I'm supposed to get 10%. So that's a dowry you can collect from the properties that were sold. But the condition of the ksuba, like mezainos, if she's entitled to food and they sold properties, she can't claim it back. In other words, she doesn't have food. Basically, if the brothers went ahead and sold the property and there's no money left, they made bad investments, then she can't claim it from mishubadim. So that's the difference between dowry and mezainos. So if that's the case, if that's the teaching of Rav Huna, my Kamashmula, what is he teaching? Homaisim b'chol yom. That's the story which we know from a long time before Rav Huna existed. Moitzian leparnasa, we're allowed to call back karka, land that was sold, which belonged to the dowry. The ein moitzian lemzainos. You don't call back land that was slated to feed her. So therefore, what is the teaching of Rav Huna? The Ella, rather, the ilu parnasa gavya nami mimetaltli, that parnasa for dowry, if there's no, let's say the guy left over no property, you can collect dowry from his movable items. Let's say he had a diamond cuffling or something like that. That could be used as part of the dowry. Utnai ksuba, mimikarki gavya, mitaltli loy gavya, but the other conditions of the ksuba, for example, food, you could only collect from karka and not from metaltlim. The Rav Idi mikva gavya. According to Rebbe, Idi v'Idi mikva gavya. According to Rebbe, doesn't matter food, it doesn't matter dowry, it doesn't have to. You don't only collect it from real estate. You can collect it from movable items. The Tanya we learned in a brisa. Let's say the guy in his estate left over real estate. And whether he left over movable items, you collect from those items, even if it's movable items, to support his almana and to support the daughters, and also probably to give, bonos means to give a dowry for the children. So for the girls, Divrei Rebbe. So what did Rav Huna teach you? That parnosa, dowry, is one thing different than food. So here's the very important point. And this is a very important point to remember about this dowry business. Elamai parnosa enik ketanai ksuba. What does it mean? Parnosa is not like mezoinas. That means l'ketatanya. A guy is on his deathbed, and he says, "Don't feed my daughters from my possessions. When I die, let them starve." So the Brisa says, "Ein sheimin." He has no right to do that. We don't listen to him, and when he dies, we'll feed his daughters. But if he says, "Al yispanusu b'noisev v'nechasav," but if he says, "Don't give my dowry, don't give dowries to my daughters, give it all to my boys," sheimin loy, then you listen to him, because it's not a condition in the Kesuba. It's like the Rabbanan, it's not even written into the Kesuba. It's the Rabbanan said that most people want to give a dowry to their daughter, and it's for the benefit of the daughter. But if he says on his deathbed, "Don't give any dowry for my daughter when she gets married," you listen to him. Parnosa, giving a dowry is not like a Tanai Ksuba. It's not a must thing to do. It's only in case the father never said anything, then the Rabbanan kicked in and said, "Okay, but maybe he would have wanted to give 10% for dowry. But if he said it explicitly not to give, we won't give it." Rav wrote a letter to Rebbe. You see, Rav lived in the time of Rebbe. Rav is the first Amoira, and he wrote it to the last Tana, Rabbeinu Kodesh. He wrote a line in amongst the letter of saying hello, in between the lines, like he wrote a postscript. I have to ask you a question. What's the question? That means if the brothers gave away the land. Let us say that there's property. Let us say that there's property and in their estate, and the brothers just sold it off. Mahu, what's the din with the dowry? Do they have to provide a dowry if there's no other possessions left? Rav Chia was listening into this conversation. So Rav Chia asked the question. He read the letter and he asked the question. What's the question? Machru or mishkenu? Did the estate sell the property? Or mishkenu, did they refinance the property? That means if they refinanced the property, they took a mortgage out. Really, the property is still in the possession of the estate. Amalei, so Rebbe spoke up and he says, "My nafkamina, what's the difference? Bein machru, bein shemishkenu, whether they sold the property, and certainly if they just mortgaged the property, moitzi and leparnasa, they actually claw it back and give 10% of the property to the dowry. They moitzi and limzonis, and they don't claw it back to feed the lady and the almana. If it was sold, then there's no lien on that property." You're going to ask, wait, isn't like food more important? So why wouldn't you be able to claw it back for food if they sold the property and now there's no money to feed the almana and the yisayimim? So why wouldn't you claw it back? Because for you can't blame the buyer. You see, the buyer who bought it, he this is an unlimited claim against his property. So therefore, for Tikkun Olam, they said that if a person buys a property from the estate of Yisayimim, they can't come collecting, "Oh, we need it for food. The sale was a mistake, and you wasted your money." But if he knows there's a daughter there and that 10% of the estate belongs to the daughter, so he should have been careful not to buy such a property if there's potential lien on it for the dowry. Therefore, we will call it back if, in case there is no assets left. We will call it back and foreclose on it, so to give the dowry to the daughter. So the Gemara just asked one question. Barav, Rav, why, when he asked to pose the question, he said if the estate, the brother, the inheritors, the sons just sold, he just got rid of the property. Why didn't he write that they either sold the property or refinanced the property? Why was it such a short message of a question? The Gemara explains, Rav was asking really a question on both. whether they sold the property or they mortgaged the property. Visavar and Rav held. If I would have written the question to Rebbe, what happens if they sold the property? If he would tell me it's clawed back, so kolshke mishkanu, then I for sure know that if it was mortgage, you claw it back. But if Rebbe would have wrote to me, you don't claw it back, I would think akata mishkanili kamabaylit. Then maybe it's not clawed back if it's sold. But maybe if it was just mortgage, you would claw it back. So it wouldn't be clear for me if Rebbe just answered me one question if I just wrote about machru. If I wrote, let's say, Rebbe, what would be the din if the kids mortgaged the property? If I wrote to them Mishkanu that the property was mortgaged, so then if he would write back to me, oh, you don't Maitzian, we're not going to foreclose or claw it back. So then I would know kolshke machro. Certainly, if they were sold, you don't claw it back. Madach, if there was just mortgage, you don't take away that property. Certainly, if they sold the property, you don't claw it back. But ishalachli mitzian, if I would have written to him mitzian, if he would have written back that you do claw it back, akati machri kumabale, I would still have the question regarding if it was mortgage, what would be the din? So therefore, if it was sold, what would be the din? Because only if it was mortgage, you claw it back. What about selling it? Maybe it's in somebody totally different, not in my possession. Would you claw it back? So actively shibude. I wrote that there's now a lien on the property. It can mean either way. It was sold or it was mortgaged. The mashmahachi, it means either way. So the point you have to remember over here, and this is the main point, Rebbe said a fantastic thing. He said that for dowry, even if the kids sold the property and there's no money left to give her a dowry, she can actually foreclose on the property that was sold because she has a claim against that 10%. Rabbi Yochanan argues against Rebbe. Whether it's for food, whether it's for dowry, once a property is sold, you don't claw it back, you don't foreclose on it. Now, how could Rabbi Yochanan argue against Rebbe? Rabbi Yochanan is an Amoira. Rabbi Yochanan himself, Lo Shmir Le Had the Rebbe. He did not hear that Rebbe would argue on him. The Ishmir Le, if he would have heard having Mekabale, he would accept it. Or Dilma Shmir Le, he knew what Rebbe holds. But Lo Mekabale, Rabbi Yochanan could argue against Rebbe. So maybe Rabbi Yochanan argues against Rebbe. Toshma, come in here. Listen to this case. The Idma we learn. A guy died, and he left over 2 daughters and a son, okay? Okay, so 3 kids, a son and 2 daughters. So the first daughter got married, and she took the 10%. The second one didn't get married yet, or didn't get engaged yet, till the son died. Now, when the son dies, and there's no other sons, so then the whole estate is split between the 2 girls. Rabbi Yochanan said, Shnia Vitra, but the second one gave up on her 10%. In other words, the second one could say, hey, when I get married, I want 10%, and then we should split the remainder. Because you got your 10%, you married first, so now I'm going to take my 10%, and then we'll split the remainder. Rabbi Yochanan said, no. Since she's anyway going to get a big chunk of money, half the estate, so we don't give her the 10%, plus split the rest. So she doesn't get the 10%. So the first girl that got married was lucky enough she got 10%. And now she's going to split the remaining estate. Rab Chanina argued against Rabbi Yochanan. He said, we say dowry is so important that you could claw back sold properties to collect the dowry. So we see dowry is very important. But Amra Shnia Vitra, you're going to tell me that the second girl, because she didn't get married, she gave up her 10%? Wrong. So she didn't give up her 10%. She gets her 10%, and then you split the rest. Now, it seems that Rab Chanina introduced to Rabbi Yochanan this concept of Mitziin Leparnasa, they Mitziin Lemzonis, which is what Rebbe said. You can go after sold properties for a dowry and not for Mizonis. Then Isa, if Rabbi Yochanan never heard of such a thing, Namelay Man Amr, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan ask, who said such a thing? What do you mean? That's a very new topic that you're bringing up. I never heard something sing. So it must be Rabbi Yochanan heard of it. He heard that Rebbe said it, and nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan argues, and he says you never go after lien properties for a dowry. So the Gemara says, "V'dilma la'olam lo shmilei." Maybe Rabbi Yochanan never heard of it. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan would retract. For a dowry, you could go after properties that were sold. V'chi shmilei, when Rabbi Yochanan would heard that Rebbe said that, Kabel, he would have retracted and accepted that you do go after sold properties for a dowry. But why did he say that over there in the case with the son dying and the second girl didn't collect on her dowry yet? The Rabbi Yochanan says, yeah, she gave up her dowry because she's getting a windfall over here. So if she the whole point of the 10% was not to send her into marriage without anything. But if she's getting a windfall anyway, so we don't want to be too greedy. Give her 10% and then now split the estate with your sister. No, your father, the son died. Now the estate is split. You're not ready to get married. Just split it and be done with it. Amalei Rav Yemel or Rav Ashi, Rav Yemel said to Rav Yashi, now that you said such a thing, that as soon as a girl gets a windfall, she loses her rights to the 10% dowry. What happens? Ashkacha mitzia ba'alma. Let's say she found that she won the lottery, right? And she didn't get married yet. The Ika Revach Besa, because now she's a rich lady. Would you say she gave up her 10%? Just because she got a windfall doesn't mean she's giving up her 10%. But this is about this windfall from these properties, from this estate. From this estate, she already got a windfall. She doesn't have to be so greedy and take 10% beyond splitting it. So first 10%, then split it. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Now, so we're saying that a girl gets a dowry. Now let's examine this one step further. What does that mean? Who owes her? Does that mean that she has a claim for a dowry on the entire estate? That every piece of asset that's in the estate is lien, so to speak, onto her dowry. So Amar Amema said, Bas Yereshes Havya. The daughter is like an inheritor. Her dowry is like she's inheriting that dowry. It's in that, and so therefore she has a right to take any part of the estate for her dowry. That's what Amema said. Amalei Ravashi la Amema. So Ravashi said to Amema, if the brothers want to get rid of their sister and say, here, take money and don't have any claims on the estate, they won't be able to do that because she's a Yereshes. She has rights to anything she wants. She's an inheritor. Amema said, yes, in. So the Gemara asks, if they decide to give her one piece of land and say the rest of the properties belong to us, the boys, they won't be able to get rid of her because she's like an inheritor. She's like the third inheritor. She's like a boy because she has a dowry, and the dowry puts a lien on all the assets. And so Amema said yes. So Amema has this shita that Bas Yereshes Havya. She's like an inheritor. But Ravashi disagreed, and very important. It's not that she's now like a boy, that she has an inheritance. No, it's an obligation, and the Gemara is going to tell us it's an obligation of the boys. It's like they almost like owe this money to her as like it's a loan, but it's not like she becomes like an inheritor. Ravashi Bas Balas Choydav. She's just a litigant. She has a claim, like she lent the boys the money, and now they owe her the money. And Amema just also agrees with that. It's not like that she has a claim. And by being a Baal Choiv, that means the boys can decide to give her anything they want. They can give her money. They can give her one piece of land. She can't say, I want this, this, this. She's not like she's an inheritor. She's owed this money, but she's not like a boy that has a claim against everything. She's like a heir. The Amar Rabbi Yuni, and Aramea also regretted what he said and changed his mind. The Amar Rabbi Yuni said, I was in front of Amema. There was a woman that came to him that wanted her 10%. I saw Amema said, you know what? If they really wanted to get this girl done and dealt with, they should give her a little bit of money and she should go away. Take her 10% in cash. Now, because I was there and Amema was there, and Amema overheard the brother saying, had we had money, we would have given her money. The Ishtik and Amema was quiet. It must be that Amema didn't say anything. It must mean that Amema would agree that really, that not the girl claiming for her 10% dowry is not like a Yorish, like he originally said, but Amema changed his mind and agreed with Rav Ashi that she's just a claimant, that's somebody that's owed money to, and therefore you can actually just give them cash or anything you want and then and settle your claim. Now the Gemara says, now that you say that she's just has a claim, but she's not an inheritor, so the question now becomes, who loaned the money? In other words, who really has the obligation to pay? Who's the original obligation? Do you say it's the Abba? It was the father's original obligation to pay this dowry, or the Ache, or what did Chachamim put this obligation on the brothers? What's the difference? They have to pay it from the estate, because if it's their obligation, the then she's like any, when you loan money, you have a claim against the mediocre properties. That means they have a claim against the Baiminus properties, that we know that if a halva, you could claim even on medium properties, not the best quality, not the worst quality, and you don't have to swear. She doesn't have to swear that she didn't collect her 10%. But if she was the claim was originated from her father, and she's coming to collect this claim from the Yisayim, then that would be the case. Viziburis bishvua. Then she could only collect from the worst fields, and she would have to make a swear that she didn't collect her 10%, because we have a rule that when you're coming to collect money from Yisayim, Chazal said you always have to swear. So, Mike, what's the din with this dowry business? Whose obligation did it originate from? The father or the brothers? Tashma, come in here. The Ravina Agve Liberati the Rav Ashi Mimar Bered Rav Ashi Baininus the Shaloi B'Shvua. He already collected Baininus, and it was without a Shvua. So Rav Ashi died, and Mar, the son, was paying off the debt. So, and he and Ravina collected for the girl Baininus and didn't require her to swear. But there was another brother called Rav Sama, and he died also in the time of Rav Ashi. So part of the dowry claim is also on the other brother called Rav Sama, and he only had to give ziburis, the worst field, but the girl had to swear to her to swear that she's collecting, because really it was his father's problem, Rav Sama, and therefore this son has a din of a Yasaim, and the daughter, which is basically her aunt, trying to collect, would have had to swear to her. The bottom line is, what you have to remember, that it is, when you're collecting the dowry, it's really an obligation put on the boys. They didn't borrow any money, but Chazal put this obligation on the boys, and she who can collect her dowry from the medium properties, and she doesn't have to swear. The Gemara continues. He said, Rav Nechemia said, sent a message to Rav Huna. There was a woman that came to Rav Nechemia, and she needed help because she was a girl trying to collect her dowry. So Rav Nechemia sent to Rav Huna, the small one, when this girl will come to you, so make sure she gets her 10%. She's a Yisayma. Afilim iftar rubla, even from land that has like a millstone on it, even though it's like such unusable land, you could use that as part of her 10% dowry. Rav Ashi says, and probably she rents out the spot where the millstone is, so she gets rental income. It's much clearer in this one. Rav Ashi says, from the rental income of properties, she could collect her 10%. Again, the 10% dowry must be collected from real estate, but it doesn't mean that she now owns real estate. She could collect her 10% from rental income that came in, because since that profit came from real estate, that means that you could give her the 10% from that money. Rabbanan sent to Rav Huna, Hunan Chavrim. Rabbanan sent a message to Rav Hunan. Hunan, my friend, Shalom, hello. If this girl who's a Yisrael comes before you, make sure you give her Agba Isinechsei. Give her 10%. So Rav Huna was very upset that Rav Anan had the nerve to call him Hunan, my friend. Rav Huna is not his friend. Rav Huna felt he was greater than Rav Anan. So Rav Yasheshes was sitting in front of him. Amalei, so he said to Rav Sheshes, Zilma Emala, go tell Rav Anan, Uvashamti Heimandule Amalei, I'll put your chayrim if you don't repeat my words. Go tell him back and insult Rav Anan back. Anan, call him Anan, Mr. Anan. How should I give this girl 10%? Should I give it from the real estate or from the movable items for her dowry? And see if Rav Anan is such a knowledgeable person, asking this question. Uman Yasser Bei Marzecha Beresha. By the Bei Marzecha, who sits at the head? Now, Bei Marzecha, what is Bei Marzecha? It's a puzzle question. He was trying to show that Rav Anan doesn't know anything. Not doesn't know anything, but he can't, Rav Huna is much smarter than him. Also, Rav Sheshes the Rav Anan. So Rav Sheshes came to Rav Anan, and he said, Amalei, Rav Anan, Rabbi, I trust you, you're my Rebbe. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but Rav Huna, Rabbi the Rabba. But Rav Huna is my master's master. And he will put me in chayrim if I don't repeat exact words what I'm supposed to tell you. Vilav deshamet lahav kamina. If he wouldn't put me in chayrim, I would never say such a thing. So I'm repeating what Rav Huna wants me to say to you. Should I pay this? Get this girl 10% from real estate or from movable items? And Aman Yosef Bei Mazaycha Beresha, who sits by Bei Mazaycha in the beginning, so at the head of the table. Also, Rav Anan came to Mar Ukva. Rav Anan was distraught that Hunan seemed upset at him. He went to Mar Ukva. Amalei, and he said to Mar Ukva, Chazumar Heicha Shalach Li Rav Huna. Look at this way Rav Huna sent me a message. Anan, he called me Mr. Anan. V'oid, and he asked me a question, Marzecha, the Shalach Li, the question about Marzecha. I don't even know what a word mazecha. I don't even know the vocabulary of mazecha of the question he asked me to how to answer it. Amalei, so Rav Mar Ukva wanted to know. Emily, easy. We go to Amid Beis. Easy gufa de uvda hechahava. What's the exact story? How did it begin? Why did you get into such a heated exchange with him? Amalei hachi b'hachi ava ma'isa. I told him this was the story. I called him Huna, my friend. Answer me a question. Amalei, so Mar Ukva said to him, Gavra, Mr. Rabbi Anan, you don't know how to answer him when he asks you a question about this Marbech Zecha. You're calling him back Huna, my friend. Rav Huna felt it was disrespectful for you to call him Huna, my friend. He's not your friend. He's a great Rav Huna. So therefore, he tried to needle you back by asking you this question, a difficult question. But the question is, my Marzecha, what does it mean? Who sits at the head when it's a Marzecha? So the Gemara says, Abel. A mourner. That if mourners have if you have a mourner, let's say a bunch of people are getting together to eat, and there's a mourner, the mourner sits at the head of the table. We give him the respect. The ksiv kayam Hashem al tove beis mazeah. Because he feels bad, so we don't want to put him. We want to make him feel good, just because he's a mourner. So we put him at the head of the table. And there's a pasuk that says beis mazeah, which refers to mourners. It's a pasuk in Yirmiyah. Amar Rabba said, how do you know you put an oval at the head of the table? If you're having a meal, put the oval at the head of the table. The eshtoin kamelach bagdur. I'm going to sit at the head of the table like a king in front of his army. Kasha avelin yanachem, like mourners coming to comfort somebody. Yanachem acher mashma. It seems that the comforters sit at the head of the table. Because if it was referring to comforters, it should have an extra aleph there. So you read it as yinochem. So the example is, I'm going to sit at the head of the table like a king at the head of his troops, and like an oval who's being comforted by other people. So we see that it's a remez that an oval sits at the head of the table. You can understand why. Again, he feels so out of it. Mar v'zarach, someone who's bitter and flustered, nasasar l'suruchim, he sits at the head of the table like a sar. So Rava concluded this whole thing. I point out that he called him an avel because Huna needled Rav on, and he said, sometimes avel, he sits at the head of the table, not because he's the most important, because luck had him that he's an avel. That's why we put him at the head of the table. So Rav Huna needled Rav on, and he said, you know why you're Rosh Hashiva? You know why you're ahead? Sometimes life puts people into high positions, even though they're not worthy of it. That was sort of like the needle that Rav Huna sent back to Rav Onan. Anyway, the Gemara concludes this whole story. Amar Rava, Hilchas of the halacha is for dowry or for anything. Mimikarki, you only collect from real estate, not from the movable items. Beilim is writing whether you're collecting for the food for the almana and the food for the children, for the daughters. Bein leksuba, whether it's for the almana's ksuba. Bein leparnasa, whether it's for the dowry, you collect it from real estate, and that's and not from movable items. So this ends the sugya of dowry.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Good
Shkoyach, good enough.
night.
Good night.
Shkoyach, good night.